we tend to think of prostitution as something tied to money, crime, and modern cities. But for most of human history, sex wasn't sold the way we imagine today. In many cultures, it was free, ritualized, or even considered sacred. So why did people offer sex without payment, and who actually benefited from that system? The answer is much stranger than it sounds. The oldest profession myth. People often say prostitution is the oldest profession in the world, but that phrase hides an important detail. The word prostitution comes from the Latin prostitutio, meaning to put on public display for sexual use. In modern terms, it means providing sexual services in exchange for money. And here's the key point. Money wasn't always part of the equation. In early societies, sex could serve social, ritual, or biological purposes, not commercial ones. And to understand that, we need to start with hospitality itself, because some of the earliest forms of prostitution had nothing to do with business at all. When hospitality included sex, here's something that sounds shocking today, but was normal in some ancient cultures. In certain societies, offering a sexual partner to a guest was part of hospitality. Anthropologists call this guest prostitution or hospitality hedonism. Among some peoples of the Arctic regions, including areas of the Russian Empire, a host might offer a visitor to share a bed with a woman from the household. No money, no negotiation, just tradition. Researchers believe this practice is a remnant of very old social systems, possibly linked to matriarchal structures and early forms of group marriage, where strict monogamy didn't yet exist. But hospitality wasn't the only reason. There were deeper beliefs behind it: fertility, genes, and survival. One reason guest prostitution existed was spiritual. Many communities believed outsiders carried special life force or fertility. Sex with a foreigner was thought to bring prosperity, healthy children, or good fortune. Another reason was purely biological. Closed communities suffer from inbreeding over time. Introducing outsiders helped diversify genes and produce stronger offspring. From a survival perspective, it made sense. And then there was a third reason that feels especially alien today. In some cultures, including parts of Tibet, it was considered an honor if a guest accepted such an offer. Refusing could be seen as disrespectful. But this still wasn't prostitution as we usually imagine it. That version emerged somewhere else, in temples. Sacred sex and temple prostitution. Now we enter one of the most controversial chapters in history. In many ancient civilizations, sex was linked to religion. This is often called ritual, cult, or temple prostitution. In ancient Sumer, this practice was documented as early as the 18th century BCE in the Code of Hammurabi. There was a clear legal distinction between ordinary sex workers and temple women, known as hierodules. There was a clear legal distinction between ordinary sex workers and temple women known as hierodules, the Babylonian ritual that shocked historians. According to ancient sources, every Babylonian woman was required, once in her life, to visit the temple of the goddess Ishtar. She would sit there until a man threw money into her lap and had sex with her. Some women waited days, others waited years. Greek historians, especially Herodotus, were deeply disturbed by this practice. He described it with open disgust. Here's the irony. Similar rituals existed in ancient Greece itself. Temple prostitution was practiced in the sanctuary of Aphrodite in Corinth and other cities of the Hellenistic world, so the outrage was selective, and this wasn't limited to the Mediterranean, from India to the Americas. In India, temple prostitution survived into the modern era. Women known as Devadasis served in temples as dancers and performers. They often had sexual relationships with men from higher castes. This system was officially banned only in 1988. On the other side of the world, among the Aztecs, both female and male prostitution existed. There was even a deity associated with sex workers. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, they condemned these practices as immoral. Much like accusations of cannibalism and human sacrifice, sexual customs were used to justify conquest and destruction. But moral condemnation didn't stop prostitution. Religion simply changed how it was treated. Christianity, control, and disease. Early Christian thinkers had a surprisingly pragmatic view. Saint Augustine is often quoted as saying that removing prostitutes would lead to chaos in cities. As Christianity spread, prostitution wasn't eliminated. It was tolerated, regulated, and pushed to the margins. Everything changed with one event: the arrival of syphilis from the New World. The disease spread rapidly across Europe and hit the sex trade harder than any law ever could. From that moment on, prostitution became framed as a public threat, not just a moral issue. And that legacy still shapes how societies treat it today. So who benefited and why it was free? So why was prostitution once free? Because it wasn't always a transaction. It was a tool. It served religion, hospitality, population survival, and social stability. Communities benefited, temples benefited, rulers benefited. What we now call prostitution was once embedded in the structure of society itself. Today, countries still can't agree on how to treat it, but they do agree on one thing: exploiting minors is a crime. Everything else remains unresolved. Because what looks like a simple exchange of bodies was never simple at all. It was about power, belief, survival, and who controlled them.